Hey y'all, it's Miss Flores. So today we're going to continue order of operations using PEMDAS. Remember, parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. But today we're going to extend that a little bit and we're going to practice with decimals. So PEMDAS works the exact same way whether we're dealing with decimals, fractions, whole numbers, anything like that. We still follow the exact same steps, but now our problems will involve some decimal numbers. So let's look at our first problem. All right, so what I would like us to do is to do this one together, and then maybe the rest of the problems, y'all pause it, try it on your own, see if you can do it, see how you do, and then press play again to see if you got your answer correct. All right, so our first problem is 8 5/10 divided by 5 times 6 2/10 plus 11. All right, so make sure you write PEMDAS off to the side, right? PEMDAS. We're not doing exponents because we're only in 5th grade. So the first thing I look for is parentheses. I don't have any parentheses, right? So that step is done. My next step would be to look for multiplication and division. I multiply and divide in order from left to right. So I'm going to do this division first, 8.5 divided by 5, and then whatever that is times 6.2. So let's do 8.5 divided by 5. So these problems, you'll probably have to do some work on the side, right? 8.5 divided by 5. Well, 5 goes into 8 one time. 1 times 5 is 5. Subtract and you get 3. 5 can't go into 3, right? So I bring down this 5. 5 goes into 35, though, 7 times. 7 times 5 is 35 exactly. I subtract and I get 0. So then I make sure to bring my decimal up from my problem into my answer, end up with 1.7. So 8.5 divided by 5 was 1.7. So now I have 1.7 times 6.2 plus 11. So now my next step would be to do this multiplication. So I'm going to do 1.7 times 6.2. So let's do that over on the side. I'm going to have to erase some of this to have some extra room. So now I'm going to do 6.2 times 1.7. All right. 7 times 2 is 14. Carry the 1. 7 times 6 is 42. Plus 1 is 43. All right. So I'm done with my 7, so I've got to move on to my next row. So I draw my placeholder smiley. And then I multiply my 1 out. So I do 1 times 2 is 2. And 1 times 6 is 6. So I multiplied everything out, and now I'm ready to just add. So I'm going to do 4 plus 0 is 4. 3 plus 2 is 5. 6 plus 4 is 10. But I had those two numbers to the right of my decimal, right? So my decimal and my answer has to scoot over from the right 2 places. So 1, 2, and I end up with 10 and 54 hundredths. So now I've got 1.7 times 6.2 was 10.54. And then I bring down my plus 11. So 10.54 plus 11. So now I'm just going to add those up. So I would do 10.54 plus 11. Remember, if that decimal is out of sight, the decimal goes to the right. So the decimal would be the right of this 11. So I'd end up with 11 point, and then I've got these 2 blank spaces that I've got to add my placeholder zeros. And now I add. So 4 plus 0 is 4. 5 plus 0 is 5. Make sure my decimals are in line. They are, so my answer decimal goes down here. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. So my answer would be 21 and 54 hundredths as my final answer. So that was quite a bit of work because this isn't necessarily, some of these problems aren't mental math problems, right? Like dividing with decimals and multiplying with decimals. Those do involve some real work, right? So you might end up having more work on these problems, but they are done the exact same way as we were doing order of operations before. Let's look at the next one. Our next problem is 5. It's next to the parenthesis, right? Right next to the parenthesis. So that means that I'm multiplying. So I've got 5 times 7.3 minus 4 plus 21 minus 2.6. All right. So first off, I have to think PEMDAS, parentheses. We don't do exponents. Multiply and divide from left to right, add and subtract from left to right. All right, so first off, I'm going to look at my parentheses, all right? I've got these whole parentheses. Inside those parentheses, I've got to follow order of operations. I don't have any multiplication or division, right? I don't have any other parentheses. I just have addition and subtraction. So addition and subtraction is done from left to right. So I'm going to start off by doing my first subtraction, which would be 7.3 minus 4. So remember, when decimals are out of sight, they go to the right. So my decimal for 4 would go to the right of my 4. So I'm going to do 7.3 minus 4 and then I've got that blank space, so that would be 0, 4.0. And I subtract. 3 minus 0 is 3. 7 minus 4 is 3. My decimals are lined up, so my decimal goes here. So 7.3 minus 4 was 3.3. So now I've got 3.3 plus 21 minus 2.6. So now I'm going to do this addition, 3.3 plus 21. So same thing. 21 doesn't have a decimal. If it's out of sight, it's to the right. So that decimal is to the right of 21. So I'm going to do 21 point plus 3.3. I've got a blank space here, so I've got to add a placeholder 0. And now I'm ready to add. So I'm going to do 0 plus 3 is 3. 1 plus 3 is 4. 2 by itself is 2. Make sure your decimals are lined up, which they are. So my decimal and my answer goes down there. And I'm left with 24.3. So now I've got 24.3 minus 2.6. So let's do that. 24.3 minus 2.6. Well, I've got to borrow 7. Make sure your decimals are lined up, which they are. And I get 21.7. So 21.7. So now remember, this entire parentheses, my whole parentheses, when I solved it, came down to 21.7. So now it's parentheses and then 5 on the outside, right? So that means 5 times 21.7. Let me erase this so we have some room. So now we've got 5 times 21.7. So I'm going to do 21.7 times 5 as my last step. Remember, when you're multiplying, you do not need to line up any decimals. In actuality, it's going to end up making your problems more difficult if you go out of your way to line up decimals and add decimals. So I'm going to do 5 times 7, which is 35. Carry the 3. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. 5 times 2 is 10. Then I have that one number to the right of my decimal. So I scoot my decimal over one place, and I end up with 108.5 as my final answer. All right, let's look at our next one. So now we see that we have nested parentheses. So I've got 16.1 plus parentheses 18 divided by 3, close parentheses, times 4.9. So I have to remember PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents. We don't do those yet. Multiply and divide from left to right, add and subtract from left to right. Okay, so I'm going to look at my parentheses. I've got these parentheses first, right? But inside those parentheses, I've got even more parentheses. So I'm going to do my innermost parentheses first. That would be 18 divided by 3. Well, what's 18 divided by 3? 18 divided by 3 is 6. 6. So now I've got 16.1 plus 6. That was my other parentheses, right? So I've got to do that next. So remember, when decimals are out of sight, the decimals go to the right. So my decimal is going to go to the right of that 6. And now I've got decimals to line up for my addition. So I'm going to do 16.1 plus 6 point, and then I've got a blank space, so I'm going to put a 0. And now I'm ready to add. So 1 plus 0 is 1. Make sure my decimals are good, which they are. 6 plus 6 is 12, carry the 1, and I get 22.1. So my whole parentheses end up being 22.1. So now I've got 22.1 times, I've got that 4.9, right? 22.1 times 4.9. All right, so that will be my final step. I'm going to erase this so I have more room. Do not erase your work as you go. I want you to make sure that you're working all these problems out and you have all of your work shown. I'm just erasing it because I'm out of room, but y'all can grab more scratch paper. So I'm going to do 22.1 times 4.9. All right, so 9 times 1, then 9 times 2, then 9 times 2 again. 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times 2 is 18. Carry the 1. 9 times 2 is 18, plus 1 is 19. All right, so I'm done with my 9, so I move on to my next row. Add my placeholder smiley. And then I multiply out my 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 2 is 8 again. And I add those up. So then I'm just going to add my 9 plus 0, which is 9. 8 plus 4 is 12. Carry the 1. 1 plus 9 is 10. Plus 8 is 18. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 plus 8 is 10. And I am done. I just have to make sure I got all my numbers to the right of my decimal. So I've got a 1 here and a 9 here. That is 2 numbers to the right of my decimal. So I'm going to scoot it over 2 to the left. So I go 1, 2, and I end up with 108.26. So my answer is 108 and 29 hundredths. Let's look at our next problem. We got 2 more, and then we'll go on to a question from our assignment. All right. Now I've got 3.7 plus plus parentheses 12.6 divided by 2 minus 4. All right, so PEMDAS, parentheses. We don't worry exponents. Multiply and divide from left to right. Add and subtract from left to right. All right, so first thing I look for is parentheses. Got my parentheses right here. So inside those parentheses, I have to follow PEMDAS, right? So I've got division and subtraction. Well, I'm definitely going to do my division before I ever do my subtraction. So I'm going to do that 12.6 divided by 2 first. So let's do that off to the side. 12.6 divided by 2. Well, 2 can't go into 1, so I put an X above it. But it can't go into 12, right? 2 goes into 12 6 times. 6 times 2 is 12. I subtract and I get 0. 2 can't go into 0, so I bring down my 6. 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6 exactly. I subtract and I get 0. So now I just have to move my decimal from my problem up into my answer. And I end up with 6.3 as my final answer to my division problem. So 12.6 divided by 2 is 6.3. So now my parentheses are 6.3 minus 4. So I'll just do that subtraction real quick. 6.3 minus, remember, numbers that don't have decimals, if it's out of sight, it's to the right. So my decimal goes to the right of that 4. So 4 point, and then I've got nothing, so it's going to be a 0. Well, 3 minus 0 is 3. 6 minus 4 is 2. Add my decimal where it's lined up, so 2.3. So my parentheses ended up being 2.3. But I cannot forget this 3.7 plus, right? So it was 3.7 plus 2.3. All right, let me erase this so I have some room. Well, 3.7 plus 2.3. 3.7 plus 2.3. All right. My decimals are lined up, so I'm good to go. 7 plus 3 is 10. Carry the 1. 1 plus 3 plus 2 is 6. So I land on my decimals. My decimal would be here. So my answer would be 6.0, or you don't even need that 0, right? It could just be 6. All right. Let's look at our next one, our final one before we look at our assignment for today. So we've got nested parentheses here. We have a lot of work, it looks like. So I've got 3.4 times 16 minus 14 divided by 7 plus 5.8. So remember PEMDAS, parentheses. Don't worry about exponents. Multiply and divide from left to right, then add and subtract from left to right. Okay, so I've got lots of parentheses. I've got these overall parentheses, right? And inside there, I've got these parentheses and these parentheses. Well, the parentheses around 16, which is 16 in there, right? So that parentheses is really just being used to show multiplication. It's showing 16 times 3.4 because 3.4 is touching it. So the parentheses I'm going to do first are going to be the ones that I actually have to solve. So that's going to be my 14 divided by 7. So now 14 divided by 7 is 2. So now I end up with 3.4 times 16 minus 2. So I'm going to do my 3.4 times 16. Well, 6 times 4 is 24. Carry the 2. 6 times 3 is 18 plus 2 is 20. I'm going to multiply my 1 out, so I move to my next row. Add my placeholder 0. I'm going to do 1 times 4, which is 4. And then 1 times 3, which is 3. And now I add up my numbers. So I get 4 plus 0 is 4. 0 plus 4 is 4. 2 plus 3 is 5. I have one number to the right of my decimal, so I scoot it over one place. And I end up with 54.4. So now this would be 54.4 minus 2. Well, that's easy. So remember, when I'm adding and subtracting with whole numbers, I have to think if my decimal's out of sight, it goes to the right. So my decimal's to the right of that 2. So I'm going to do 54.4 minus 2 point. I've got nothing there, so that's going to be a 0. Well, 4 minus 0 is 4. My decimals are lined up. 4 minus 2 is 2. 5 by itself is 5. So this would end up being 52.4. But I can't forget about my plus 5.8. So plus 5.8. Now my final step is just to add those. Let me do that right down here real quick. So 52.4 plus 5.8. 8 plus 4 is 12. Carry the 1. 1 plus 2 plus 5 is 8. And then 5 is 5. So I end up with 58.2 as my final answer. All right, your assignment for today is going to be a Google form that's going to look just like the image on the left. So this is the first question of our Google form. We're just solving PEMDAS problems for all these. All of our questions will be short answers, so you're just going to put the answer to the question there. I will go ahead and give you a hint that the answers to those questions do not exceed the tenths place. Tenths. So all of our answers are going to have only one decimal number if they have a decimal in their answer. Only one number to the right of the decimal. So let's solve this real quick. I've got 9.4 plus 1.5 plus 6.5. Oh, I'm out of room. Hold on a second. All right, so 9.4 plus 1.5 plus 6.5 times 6.7 minus 4.5. All right, so this seems like a long question, right? But we just have to remember PEMDAS, parentheses. We don't worry about exponents. Multiply and divide from left to right, add and subtract from left to right. So first thing I'm going to do is look for parentheses. We got some right here, right? So I'm going to do 1.5 plus 6.5. Well, 1.5 plus 6.5, 10. I get 8, right? Because I got to add my decimal in there. I get 8.0, or just 8. So let's say everything else has decimals, so we'll leave it as 8.0. So we got 8.0. So now I bring everything else down. I've got 9.4 plus 8.0 times 6.7 minus 4.5. All right. So now my next step would be to look for multiplication and division. The only multiplication or division I see is right here, right? So I've got 8 times 6.7. We can actually drop that 0.0 now because we're not going to need it since we're just multiplying. So we're going to multiply. I'm going to do 6.7 times 8. 8 times 7 is 56. Carry the 5. 8 times 6 is 48. Plus 5 is 53. I have one number to the right of my decimal, so I scoot my decimal over one space and end up with 53.6. So my 8 times 6.7 is 53.6. So now my problem is 9.4 plus 53.6 minus 4.5. So my final step is to just do my addition and subtraction from left to right. So my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my 9.4 plus 53.6. Well, 53.6 plus 9.4. 10, carry the 1. 13, carry the 1. 6, and I get 63.0. So that would be 63.0 minus 4.5. So I could just subtract 4.5. I gotta borrow 2, 5. Gotta borrow again. 85, and I end up with my final answer of 58.5 as my final answer. So we just did number 1 together on our Google form. You've got 9 other questions that you will have to do on your own. They are going to be very, very, very similar to this, very similar to the problems that we just finished working out all together. They're going to be very straightforward. Just, here's the problem. Go ahead and solve it. Remember, when we're doing order of operations, you cannot cheat and use a calculator, because if I were to just type this in the calculator, it's going to give me the wrong answer because it does not take into account our order of operations, right? It does not do the operations for us or the order that they need to be in for us. So make sure that we are doing this on a scratch sheet of paper. Make sure you're attaching that scratch sheet of paper to your assignment. By clicking add or create onto your assignment. Make sure you're taking pictures and attaching those, and we will go over any questions that y'all want to go over on this assignment together during our second meeting. Have a great day, guys. Let me know if you need anything. Bye.